Did you know your internet browsing might expose more information than you think? With a simple setup on your MikroTik router, DNS over HTTPS can improve your security and reduce who sees your queries online. Let's dive into DNS over HTTPS. I'm Wilmer Almazan, and this is the Network Trip. Every single day, we are sending hundreds, thousands, or probably millions of DNS queries to get an IP address that is mapped to a domain name. So let's see that in this topology that is basically representing a pretty common network setup. So we have a router that is connected to an ISP or multiple ISPs, and then internally we are going to have the local area network. That can be one local area network or can be multiple local area networks. But the fact here is that this device, for example, if this device is going to something like google.com or is going to mikrotik.com, it's going to send a DNS query. So the operating system is going to have a DNS server, like for example 8.8.8.8. And then the request will go to the DNS server in the form of a DNS query. And then the server is going to reply with a DNS response that is going to contain that information. So let's see this interaction and let's see what the danger that we might be facing if we are sending this type of request over internet. So I have started this interception of the traffic on the interface that is facing the ISP. I will filter this traffic by DNS. So I'm going to see only the DNS traffic. So I will simply go to this endpoint and we are going to go to a website. Let's say that I'm going to go to mikrotik.com. My PC sends a request to get the IP of the server where mikrotik.com is hosted. And now we can see that we are able to get access to that website. But underneath, this device sent a query. So you can see here that we have this query that is going to 8.8.8.8. This is UDP traffic that is going to the port 53. And then we have the domain name system. This is a query. So if I expand this header, so we can see here under queries that this query is requesting the information for mikrotik.com. So this type A means that this is asking for the IP that is mapped to that domain. So then this query will travel through internet. It's going to hit the Google DNS server, the 8.8.8.8. And that server is going to respond. And then we get this message here. So you can see the query response. And then you see that this is going to contain the response. So we have the query and then we have the answers. And then this is telling, okay, if you want to go to mikrotik.com, you have to send the request to the IP 159.148.172.205. And that's how my computer has got that IP, and now I'm going to send the request directly to mikrotik.com. The main issue with the privacy here is that anyone that is in the path between this endpoint and the DNS server is able to intercept those requests. So in this video, I'm going to be focused on how we are going to use our MikroTik device to send those secure queries to that DNS server. Internally, still we are going to continue using the traditional DNS, but now our router will be the DNS server for our internal devices. So when this device is trying to go to mikrotik.com, so now I'm going to send a request to R1, and R1 is going to forward the request to that external DNS server, but now using DNS over HTTPS. So this is going to use the same type of messages than the traditional and secure web traffic over HTTPS. This is going to have a certificate in place. We are going to get a public key that is going to be used to encrypt the query. And then if someone is intercepting that in the middle, they won't be able to see what type of request we are sending to that DNS server. Obviously, the DNS server still is going to know all the queries. It's going to be able to track the activity, but no one else in the middle is going to do it. So your ISP, your provider won't be able to see where you are sending those DNS queries, because this is going to look just like traditional web traffic using HTTPS. So that's basically the whole point about DoH that we're going to be configuring in our router. So once we have decided to use DNS over HTTPS, we have to pick who is going to be the DNS server. So most of the big companies in the market already support DoH. And then we're going to configure our MikroTik device to forward the DNS queries to those servers. There is an option as well that we can enable secure DNS directly in our browser. So in the first section of my lab, I'm going to perform the configuration on the MikroTik device. And by the end of the video, I'm going to show you how you can enable DoH directly in your browser. There are some important considerations when we are going to configure DoH directly in our MikroTik devices. The first one is that once we enable DoH, this is going to be the only DNS service that is going to be running on the router. So it's traditional IP DNS that is unencrypted, won't be used anymore. Additionally, since this is going to be using HTTPS, we need to trust the certificate from that external provider. And to do that, we have to install some certificates that will allow to trust the information that is going to be sent by that server. And additionally, if you are already using your MikroTik device as a DNS server and you have forwarding type records, you won't be able to use those anymore. So what is the configuration process? So how are we going to enable DoH? So step number one is that we need to download all the CA certificates. And to that, we're going to get a file that contains all the root certificates. So we're going to use the fetch tool. So we can simply go to tool fetch. Then we have to specify the URL. Then in this case, it's going to be HTTPS curl.se/ca/cert.pem. So this is going to download a file that contains all the root certificates. So you see, we have finished. And now if I go to files, I have this file that is called cert.pem. So you want to see what exactly is this website? We can simply copy that URL and we can go to the browser. And this is the website from curl. So this is a trusted entity. And you can see here that we have the file cert.pem that basically is going to contain a bundle with all the certificates from the root CAs. In the future, if those certificates have expired, we can simply download this file again. If you don't want to download all the certificates from the Mozilla store, we can simply download the certificate from the provider that we are going to use. And for example, I can send a request to dns.google/resolve, and I can ask for a domain. So you can pick the domain that you want. In my case, I'm sending mikrotiktraining.ca, and I'm asking for the type A. So if I copy this into the web browser, this is basically going to send this web request to the server, and the server is going to reply. So you can see here that this is including the information. We have the name, and we are getting the responses back from that specific service. And now, the important point here is that we can go to the browser, and then we can look for the connection is secure or the certificate section. And then here we can see that the certificate is valid. But if I click on this, this is going to show me this window where I can download the certificates. So if I go to details, so you can see here all the chain. Basically, we have the root, we have the intermediate certificate authority in the actual service that this certificate is being assigned to. And now I can export those certificates. For example, if I select the root, I can simply go to export, and then here I can store the certificate. This is the root CRT. Then if I select the intermediate certificate, I can do the same, export. Now I have the intermediate certificate. And finally, the one for dns.google. Same process, export. And now I will have 3 files that I can simply upload to the router and we can perform the step number 2 that is coming next. The next step is about importing these certificates. So now I have the file with all the root CAs, so I need to install those certificates in the router. We simply type certificate import, then file name, and if we press tab, this is going to show the different files that are in this device. So this is the file that I want to use, so I will simply copy and paste that name, and then I press enter, and you can see that it has imported 151 certificates. So basically, this is going to contain all the root CA certificates. This will allow to trust the certificate that the DNS server is going to send in the future. And finally, the step number 3 is that we need to configure the actual DoH server that we're going to use. In my case, I'm going to be using the one from Google, and the URL is https ://dns.google/DNS query. And to that, we are simply going to go to the router IP DNS, and then here you can see that we have this option, use DoH server. And so we'll simply click in that box, and then we're going to type https dns.google/DNS query. And we're going to enable this option, verify DoH certificate. And at this point, if I apply the changes, so now this device will be able to be used as a DNS server for our local area network. And when those devices send the DNS query to this router will be able to forward that in a secure fashion to the Google's DNS server. So we have to make sure that our local area network is going to be using this device as the DNS server. To that, I'm going to go here to DNS. I will enable this option, allows remote request. And additionally, we need to be able to resolve this DNS name. And to do that, we have to keep the traditional DNS information. In this case, I'm using a dynamic IP from my provider, and this is already injecting this information to my router, so I will keep it. But if you don't have any DNS information here, you will have to manually set at least one traditional DNS server, and then the router is going to use that information to discover that domain. If you don't want to use that name, also another option is that you can manually create an entry under static, where basically you can say something like dns.google is going to be type A, and it's going to have the address 8.8.8.8. And basically now the router has a static entry. It doesn't need any DNS server to know where it's going to find the DoH server that we are going to be using. And I will check that the local area network is using that router as the DNS server. So we're going to go to IP, DHCP server, and then if we go here to networks, and here under DNS server, we're going to make sure that we are delivering the IP of the router. So you can see 192.168.2.1, that's the IP of the interface Ether2, where basically our devices are connected. So the local area network is connected to Ether2. And now this device is going to send a query to router 1, and router 1 will forward that to that DNS server. So let's see if now we are able to intercept the traffic, or if now it's going to be hidden. To speed up the process, I'm going to send a DNS request. So it's going to go to MikroTik training.ca. I press enter, and then you can see here the DNS server that is resolving this is the router, and this is getting the IP 198.49.23.145. And we can see that here in Wireshark, we didn't capture any DNS traffic, because now this is going to be HTTPS traffic. It's like web traffic. And if I filter and I say IP.dst equals the IP in Google, you can see a lot of traffic that is going to this IP, and this is going to be protected by TLS because this is using HTTPS, and I won't be able to see what exactly is this because this looks just like regular web traffic. So I won't see the actual content because this is encrypted. All the queries going back and forth between our router and Google will be encrypted. And then the ISP or anyone in the middle won't be able to read the actual queries. I have created a GitHub repo where I have this file dns-doh.rc that basically is a script for MikroTik where you can see all the different steps that will be completed on this lab. And additionally, I have created a script. This script is going to be sending a request every 15 minutes. And if the server is down, it's going to disable the DoH in your router. If the server is responding, it's going to re-enable that service. If you want to use that script, you simply need to download the RSC file. Then you will upload the file into the router. You want to make some changes, you can modify the file before uploading it to the router. And finally, once the file is in the router, you can simply execute import and the name of the file. And this is going to bring all the configuration directly into your router. And finally, as a bonus, if you want to have the DoH working directly in your browser and you don't want to use it in your MikroTik router, it's pretty straightforward. So we can simply go, for example, I'm using Google Chrome here. We can simply go to settings and we're going to look for DNS, or we can go to the security tab. And then here you are going to have an option that is called use secure DNS. You can see that by default, this is enabled, but the DNS provider is set to OS default. So basically it's using the same that is defined on the operating system. If I want to use DoH directly here in Chrome, it's pretty simple, the process, because I simply have to select what is going to be the DNS provider. So if I'm going to use Google, I can simply go and select Google public DNS. And basically after this point, my browser is going to be sending those requests directly to Google, and it's going to be looking like web traffic. So in this case, I don't need to install any certificates, because these certificates are already on the browser by default. So we don't have to do that process manually. So now you have a new protocol available in your router that is able to improve your privacy. I hope that this video has been informative for you. Remember to subscribe to the channel, click on the bell to be notified every time that new content is coming to the channel. I'm Wilmer Almazan, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you.